The Committee on House Administration will come to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objection. The chair may declare recess at any time. Also, without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to include therein. Thank you, Ranking Member Morelli, members of the committee, and our witnesses for participating at today's panel. Before we begin, I'd like to also welcome back Dr. Murphy. It is spectacular to have you back here at the dais with us. We missed you while you're gone, but excited that you're on your way to a full recovery, we all hope, and so welcome back. Today's committee on House Administration continues our legislative oversight by focusing today on the Library of Congress. We thank Dr. Hayden, the Librarian of Congress, for joining us today to discuss the work of the Library, the Library of Congress is doing. The Library of Congress is the third largest agency under the Committee of House Administration's jurisdiction and falls under the legislative branch. In fiscal year 2024, the Library of Congress's budget was $852 million. The Library of Congress, which was first established in 1800, serves as the largest library not only in America, but the largest in the world. The Library of Congress is home to millions of books, films, newspapers, and more. And nearly 2 million people visit the Library of Congress every year. The visitors range from tourists to researchers to world-renowned scholars who go to the Library of Congress to explore the wealth of knowledge held inside. Even more people access the Library of Congress's resources online. Because of this, it's crucial that the Library of Congress is continuing its modernization efforts and working to welcome more visitors every year. The Library of Congress is also home to the Congressional Research Service, which has been a crucial, valued resource for Congress for over a century. The CRS works in a nonpartisan fashion to provide policy and legal analysis to committees and members in the House and the Senate. Since 2019, the Library of Congress Office of Inspector General has identified various areas of improvement in enterprise-wide project and budget management, cybersecurity, data storage, and collections management that have taken up much of the Library of Congress's energy. Additionally, the Library of Congress has been working to implement their Visitor Experience Master Plan. Since 2019, the Visitor Experience Master Plan budget has increased by $33 million, resulting primarily from inflation in recent years. Today, we'll be taking a close look at the budget for the Visitor Experience Master Plan, as well as focus on the initial scope set in 2019 compared to the current scope today. IT modernization is critical, and it is key the Library of Congress continues to work towards improving their IT systems. We'll also be focusing on the general oversight of the Library of Congress. This oversight includes the Library of Congress's top management challenges as identified by the Office of the Inspector General, the fiscal year 24 to 28 strategic plan, preservation and digitalization of collections, and the Congressional Research Service Director search. While progress has been made across the board at the Library of Congress, there's still more to do to make sure they're modernizing for what researchers and scholars need. I look forward to a robust discussion today to ensure we're working to advance the Library of Congress's modernization efforts. And with that, I'll yield to the Ranking Member, Mr. Morelli, for 5 minutes for the purpose of providing an opening statement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. Welcome back. Dr. Murphy, great to have you with us, and praying for your continued recovery. And you look great.
If I say something that's not really great on the record, for the next year or so, I'm just I have brain surgery.
Blanket immunity. Okay, we got that. Thank you, sir.
So ordered.
I also want to welcome students from Gettysburg College who are here with their very cool T-shirts. Because ethics bars me from getting a free one, I'm willing to pay for one of those cool T-shirts, so bear that in mind. Dr. Hayden, always a pleasure to see you, and a pleasure to discuss our shared passion for the Library of Congress, which I think is one of the most extraordinary institutions in the world. Your leadership over the past 8 years has been transformative, and I, like the other members of the committee, look forward to hearing from you today about your work to modernize the library, improve the visitor experience here in Washington, and increase access to the library's vast collections to citizens all through the country. Since its founding back in 1800, the Library of Congress has become more than a repository of books. It is the very cornerstone of American democracy. In a recent op-ed you co-authored with the Secretary of the Smithsonian and Archivist of the United States, you said that library is more important than ever as a trustworthy source of history. and you noted that it maintains our collective memory as a nation, something critical to an informed citizenry. I completely agree with those sentiments, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the ways in which the library achieves that important goal. To that end, I'm grateful that you've dedicated significant resources to connecting the library to all Americans. Those are here in D.C., the Visitor Experience Transformation Project, including the recently opened Treasures Gallery, which is fabulous. I encourage everyone to come and spend time there, will facilitate even greater and more meaningful visitation to the already breathtaking Thomas Jefferson Building, which I think is one of the most gorgeous buildings, not only in Washington, but in the world, and I look forward to an update on that project. And for individuals who can't make it to D.C., can't get here, I'm pleased that under your leadership, the library has made great strides in digital access, allowing citizens literally from coast to coast to explore our national treasuries. Also want to hear more about modernization initiatives are enhancing the library's services and capabilities, not just for members and congressional staff, but for all Americans. I'm particularly interested in your vision for the Congressional Research Service. I believe CRS is at an inflection point, and the decision you made in appointing a new permanent director that you make in that regard, I know that you're working on that, will shape the way CRS operates for decades to come. It will be imperative for the new director to ensure CRS's products and services are designed to adapt and meet the needs of a constantly changing Congress. And to achieve this, the new director is going to need to address longstanding management and organizational issues within CRS, including morale, which we understand at times has not been high as we'd like, the high attrition and lack of diversity at senior levels in the organization. The library's educational outreach has touched millions in events like the National Book Festival, help foster a love for learning and literacy nationwide. From students to researchers, from history enthusiasts to inspiring entrepreneurs, the library serves a diverse array of Americans. And as we together explore ways in which the library has enhanced its service delivery, I'm also keen to hear about your roadmap for the library's future. How will you continue to make the library's collections more accessible? How will the library continue to ensure its data, from copyright deposits to personally identified information, is protected from cyber criminals, which is a growing concern that we all have? How will the library leverage artificial intelligence to further modernize the institution, and what challenges might the use of AI bring to the library? Your service, Dr. Hayden, to learners of all ages and circumstances, and your experience as an innovator in library and information sciences are a tremendous asset to the committee, the Congress, and the country under your leadership. And I note that you often like to say that you're an actual librarian, which we so appreciate. The library has shown it can adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing world, and I'm looking forward to our discussion on how we can work together to ensure the library continues to inspire, educate, and serve Americans for generations to come. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other members' opening statements as well as letters for the record submitted from outside parties will be made part of the hearing record if they're submitted to the committee clerk by 5 p.m. today. Today we have one witness. We welcome you, Dr. Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress. Dr. Hayden was sworn in as the 14th Librarian of Congress on September 14th, 2016. We appreciate you being with us today and look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to paragraph B of Committee Rule 6, the witness will please stand and raise her right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Let the record show that the witness answered in the affirmative. We appreciate you being, you may be seated. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind you that we've read your written statement. It'll appear in full in the hearing record. You're to limit your presentation to a brief summary. And it's now my honor to recognize Librarian of Congress, Dr. Hayden, for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committee. We're very pleased to have this opportunity to appear before you to update you on the Library of Congress's activities and programs. With more than 178 million physical items and a growing digital collection, the library takes tremendous pride in our role as the steward of the national collection and a repository for our shared cultural heritage. However, it's not enough that the collections be preserved, they must also be usable. And there are many ways that our users, Congress's constituents, connect to the library, virtually and in person. In FY23, our robust and expanding online presence recorded over 150 million visits to the library websites and over 532 million page views from those who couldn't visit in person. The library responded to more than 681,000 reference requests from Congress and others. The Congressional Research Service, or CRS, published nearly 1,200 new products and handled more than 76,000 congressional requests, 3,000 more than the previous year. Our Congressional Relations Office administered over 800 events, displays, and tours for members of Congress throughout the year. The U.S. Copyright Office issued, in a timely manner, and I emphasize that, more than 441 copyright registrations. And the National Library for the Blind and Print Disabled, NLS, circulated more than 24.5 million copies of Braille, audio, and large print materials for the blind and visually impaired. In addition to all of those connection points, our buildings continue to welcome millions of visitors, researchers, and congressional stakeholders each year. In FY23, the library welcomed over 726,000 visitors to the historic Jefferson Building, a 95% increase over the previous years. And we've taken great strides to introduce new programs, initiatives, and activities to bring in new audiences. For instance, the Live at the Library Thursday night events in Jefferson welcomed more than 40,000 in-person guests in FY23 and garnered additional audiences with several events being streamed online. For visitors to Capitol Hill, a pilot program allowing visitors to explore the wonderful main reading room during specified hours received an overwhelmingly positive response from over 100,000 guests who toured the space. And we're excited about the opportunities like this to open up what we call the treasure chest and many more opportunities. To that end, you know that the Visitor Experience Initiative is one of the top priorities for the library, and we've been executing it in partnership with Congress and the architect of the Capitol, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank this committee's direct involvement with monthly briefings and bi-weekly reporting over the last 17 months. That has been a tremendous help, and we hope that that will continue as the project continues. Because the first of the three components of the initiative did open in June with the unveiling of the new David M. Rubenstein Treasures Gallery, in addition to the opening of a new library store. And the Treasures Gallery will serve as a dedicated space, the first permanent dedicated space to display the scope and wonder of the library's collections. And we will be able to periodically rotate exhibits. And the inaugural exhibit theme is Collecting Memories. And I must say, it is breathtaking. A youth center will open in late 2025, attracting new audiences to interact with our collections and exercise their creativity in a dedicated space. And the last component to open will be a visitor orientation gallery scheduled for early 2027. And this space will include the Thomas Jefferson Library, a look into the stacks for all the visitors who come to the library and wonder where and how we store the world's largest book collection. There'll be a new exhibit space to tell the library story and very engaging media interactives. And yes, elsewhere in the library, major technology enhancements are being achieved in several of our service units. We're investing in technology, and we are making sure that we are using it to our best advantage. As an example, the library is constantly enhancing the online availability of the legislative data with continuous development of congress.gov, adding new functionality every 3 weeks based on user feedback. And CRS has been working closely with our Chief Information Officer to modernize many aspects of CRS's operations. Copyright Office is continuing to make progress, and their most complex component of their modernization is a new registration application. So in closing, the library takes great pride in serving Congress and the American people, and with Congress's support, our collections and services will continue to be unmatched, and we thank this committee in particular for its interest in the library. Look forward to answering any questions, hearing your concerns, so that we can really make the Library of Congress, as our strategic plan says, a library for all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hayden. I'll begin our questions, followed by the ranking member, and then we'll alternate between parties. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes for the purpose of asking questions. Dr. Hayden, thank you for being here. In your remarks, you noted the work that's being done, in particular on the visitor experience, in particular visitor experience master plan, VEMP, I think is the acronym for short. We're familiar with that, and also some of the challenges. This VEMP began in 2019 with really good intentions to showcase the national treasures of the Library of Congress, and as you noted, there's a lot of national treasures at the Library of Congress. We came through in COVID, through inflation, rising construction costs, and some other challenges. When VEMP began, it was estimated to cost $60 million total, with $20 million coming from donors and $40 million paid from American taxpayers. Is that accurate from 2019? Yes. And then as the costs have shifted, it's now set to cost $90 million, $70 million of which would be from taxpayers. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And so just want to discuss the timeline, some of the challenges and noted with COVID and other things that have come up. Do you still anticipate VEMP being completed by 2027?
Definitely, and we have been really anxious to be able to work with the new architect of the Capitol to continue that progress that we've had, Thomas Austin. We're scheduled to make sure that we are able to make all of the deadlines, and so it's something that we're concerned about, but we think that we continue on the progress.
That's great. Do you think you have everything you need to be able to execute on the timeline that you have in front of you? I know we now have a new architect of Capitol that's been in that position for a handful of weeks, who's ramping up. Do you feel like you have what you need to be able to execute on this?
The library has what it needs. The design elements have been worked out with the architect of the Capitol. We're now in the phase that it really is part of the architect of the Capitol's domain, preparing spaces for fabrication of cases that the library is responsible for. So that's the work that's going to be done now. And in fact, it started.
Thank you very much. I think we're all excited as the full project rolls out. I think it's a great opportunity for people to be able to come in and have access to a lot of the treasures that the Library of Congress has. Let me shift gears slightly. I know a lot of the LOC staff has been utilizing telework, in particular in a substantive shift since before the pandemic. Is that an accurate description?
Yes, and we have taken a rather different approach from some other agencies. We started, and we were the first legislative branch agency to open to the public. And we did a thorough examination from each position and determined how much telework would be appropriate, and we started basically from the bottom up and went. And so there's some positions that are more appropriate for telework, and others it's impossible to do.
Understood. What would be the building utilization rate then of the Madison and Adams building, say pre-COVID to today's environment with the utilization of telework?
The space utilization has been thoroughly examined as well, because we've had to make sure that we had spaces for staff members who are coming in at different times. And in the Madison building in particular, we are making sure that we have space for expansion of the collections, even though collections in the future will be coming in even more digitally. We still will have needs for physical collections like closed stacks.
So you're seeing a transition from areas inside both the Madison and Adams building that was previously utilized
Adams,
by
right.
individuals working on premises into collections?
And in fact, we have relocated and saved a $1 million plan to have a separate building for the National Library for the Blind. We've relocated them into the Adams building, and that was a great savings, also savings on rent that we were paying.
Do you know how much will be saved over that? I was going to ask you a question on, and you brought it up. Do you know what the savings will be by that relocation?
Well, immediately, the plan for a $100 million estimate of a new facility, and even looking at renovating a space that had been designated. And then, of course, the rent, which was in the millions of dollars a year, and had been a rental space for NLS for 50 years. So the savings is wonderful, and also the fact that we now can have more programming, and the people who use our NLS services are able to have access to other places in the library in Capitol Hill.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate your testimony. I yield back, and I'll recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hayden, it is said that all politics is local, so given that, I'm actually going to start with a local issue in Rochester. My district, Rochester, New York, is home to Frederick Douglass. It's where he lived, where he published the North Star, where he is buried at Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester, and my community, in close coordination with the Douglass family, is endeavoring to build a fitting tribute to this American hero, the Frederick Douglass Museum Center. The center will focus on the pillars of Mr. Douglass's life: knowledge, equality, and justice. And the library, your library, is home to a vast collection of Douglass papers and archives. So a two-part question. First, will you commit to having the Library of Congress work with the Douglass family on developing the museum? And secondly, would you be willing to visit my district in the coming months to learn more about the project and how we could work together?
I'll take the second one first. Yes, in terms of visiting, because Frederick Douglass, as you noted, not only has a significant impact in terms of collections that are utilized by researchers at the Library of Congress, but I also have a personal connection. He famously said, "Once you learn to read, you'll be forever free." And so we would be delighted to also invite the people who are working on that project to, if they could, come and see some of the collection, and there might be opportunities, and we've done this with other institutions, partnerships, where we provide facsimiles of some of the original materials. So in their development of a museum, seeing and having the people that are working with them look at the original materials, it
That's great.
might
Thank
be
you.
helpful.
Well, thank you. I look forward to that, and I appreciate your willingness to assist in what I think will be an amazing project. Let me shift just briefly to the Congressional Research Service. It serves a vital role here in Congress. I must say that I've had, and my staff has had, many, many briefings by CRS staff. I find them to be very, very helpful, so really talented people. Can you give an update on the search for a new permanent director and the qualities that are of particular interest as you work through that process?
First, I'd like to thank Mr. Robert Newland for serving as the interim director. He's here today, and he has had already a substantial and excellent career at the library and CRS for over 40 years, and so he's brought stability and progress to the service during this period, and has also been very helpful as we have a interview panel of experts to consider the candidates, and they're going to be making recommendations to me very shortly. And they have had a substantial number of people who are interested, and one of the main qualities, though, that I'm definitely committed to is that the new director will continue with the progress that's been made and provide that continued stability to advance CRS. So that will be one of the main
Very good.
parts that I need
Thank
to
you.
look at.
Thank you, and thank the gentleman for his great work over the last several months. Last October, cyber criminals attacked the British Library, demanded a sizable ransom to restore services and return data. 9 months later, the British Library is not even close to reopening and recovering. Has the library studied that attack and learned any lessons that you could share with us?
Yes, and I just want to go on the record as saying that we join with other libraries in that library community in wishing them well, and we have benefited from the fact that the British Library actually issued a report with 16 recommendations based on their experience that they shared with the larger library community, and we had 8 of those 16 already implemented, and we were in the process of implementing the remaining 8. So with Congress's support, we have, because, as you know, the fact that we have additional security needs beyond what the British Library has. Congressional Research Service, Copyright Office, so cybersecurity has been a major concern for us.
Well, I appreciate them, would appreciate updates. One last question, if it can just be indulged, really important. I was telling my wife, who spent 31 years as middle school English language arts teacher, that you're the largest comic book collection in the
Yes.
world. She said they're called graphic novels. So I want you to break the tie between my wife and I. I call them comic books. She says graphic novels. Do you have a professional opinion?
They're both.
That's so
Comics
political.
And graphic novels are thicker and
there's a way.
usually, and more
Very good.
modern.
All right, there you go. Thank you, Dr. Hayden. I yield back.
I would always go with your wife over you, sir. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Loudermilk for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again. We've had several interactions over the years, both in this committee and over at the library. So, Dr. Hayden, it's good that you're with us again. When the Library of Congress was first founded, it was intended to be a resource to inform Congress. Over the last 2 centuries, the Library of Congress's role in our nation has expanded to include greater direct engagement with the American people, as many of the projects that you've discussed here today are illustrating. However, in recent years, it seems that the library has moved away from its primary and preeminent mission to support Congress in the legislative process. Now, as the longest-serving member of this committee, I've seen some changes in that over the years. In fact, several years ago, we were having a hearing with the library regarding the strategic plan, and there was an effort then to change the mission statement to minimize the role being the Library of Congress. And most recently, in many of the Library of Congress's branding, which emphasizes library in big bold letters with Congress in much smaller letters beneath it. So there's been a concern of a shift away from being the Library of Congress. So the question is the library still focused on its preeminent mission to serve Congress and to prioritize Congress among its customers? And if so, how are you carrying that out?
Well, thank you for that question, because we remain, and it's in our name, the Library of Congress. And by opening up more opportunities for the general public, Congress's constituents, to access some of the collections, we have not deviated from our primary mission to serve Congress. The emphasis on the Congressional Research Service shows that. They are still the research and reference arm for Congress, and we have extended what services that we can provide for Congress. So that is still in our mission. We have not deviated from it, and we won't.
Well, that's good to hear. Just and going forward, and the things that are happening with bringing the public more engaged, I think is very, very good. Just as we go forward, I think it's important that we continue that it's the Library of Congress, not just the National Library. So I thank you for your response there. On another issue, in August of last year, SIGI produced a report with serious allegations surrounding the independence of the Library of Congress's former Inspector General. The report found that Inspector General Hyde's relationship with a senior employee wrongfully created the appearance that the independence of Inspector General Hyde and his office was compromised. According to their report, the IG compromised the independence of his office. Are you familiar with that investigation and the findings of CG?
I am familiar and received notice, the library received notice in, I believe it was January of 2023. That's when we first received any indication about the investigation itself, that the issue had been closed. And also in that intervening time, Mr. Hyde had left the library in 2020. And so that's the only notification that we got from
And the reason I'm
CB.
bringing this up is a whistleblower had alleged many of the findings that were highlighted in this report. But the whistleblower was fired by the Library of Congress. Now, that whistleblower came to my office several years ago with these types of allegations. We looked into it, didn't find really anything credible at the time, but now that this report has come out, this report is alleging the same things that this whistleblower alleged that led to their termination. Real simply, we're running out of time here. Is the Library of Congress willing to reopen their review of the conduct toward that particular whistleblower, now with this new revelation that there may have been truth to the allegations?
I would need to work with you on getting information about the particular whistleblower.
Okay.
And also work with the current acting Inspector General at the library.
Okay.
So I definitely want to follow up with you on that.
Okay, I appreciate it, and I'll
look
make
into the
sure our
matter.
staff gets with your staff, too. So we
That
just
would
want to
be
make sure
helpful.
that this gets covered. So, thank you, Dr. Hayden.
The gentleman yields back. Ms. Sewell is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Hayden, for being here today. My mom, Nancy Gardner Sewell, was a high school librarian for 42 years. Libraries hold a very special place in my heart. And I have to say, during my time here in Congress, some of the most memorable and reflective opportunities I've had has been through the Congressional Dinner Series with David Rubenstein. So I want to thank you and your library staff for always engaging us as members of Congress and giving us an opportunity to have bipartisan efforts to get to know each other and to also share our shared history. And so I want to thank you for that. The Library of Congress plays a special role in preserving our nation's history because it is not only the oldest federal cultural institution in the country, but it's the largest library in the world. Every day, the Library of Congress helps Congress function by assisting members of Congress and staff with their research, learning the legislative process, and helping to develop new ideas for legislation. The Library of Congress has been intentional by developing a digital collection so that your footprint can meet every classroom and be available across this nation. Access to information is precious, but as of late, we've seen extremists making efforts across the nation to decide what information is worthy of consumption by removing books that tell the full story about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom. I believe that preserving all of our history is important because it reflects the cultural diversity, ingenuity, and challenges that are at the very fabric of this nation. Dr. Hayden, in 2021, the Library of Congress launched a minority serving institution program to connect more deeply with Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, and other minority communities by expanding its collection using technology to enable storytelling and offering more internships and fellowship opportunities. This initiative has helped a number of my constituents in HBCUs in the state of Alabama, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Can you provide an update on how this program might be impacting communities across this nation?
Thank you. The Library of Congress received one of its largest philanthropic gifts from the Andrew Mellon Foundation to develop a multi-pronged approach to having paid internships for students to mine the library's collections, discover new ways to use the library's collections, as well as to give many grants to communities for their local histories and creating things using digital methods. And we're in the third year. We've got an extension on the program, and it has developed into a program that's proof of concept for other foundations that are interested in making sure that students have an opportunity to learn how to do research, basically, and to create their own histories and in communities. So we are very pleased that the opportunity from Mellon provided us with a way to look into how we can integrate what we've learned from those programs into our regular operations. So you'll be hearing more about that.
Yes. You recently wrote an op-ed piece with the secretary of the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch, as well as with the archivist, really talking about the role of cultural institutions in preserving our collective memory. How would you describe the library's specific role in preserving our collective memory? I ask that being a little bit biased since I represent Alabama's Civil Rights District, and there's an awful lot of amazing collective history and storytelling regarding the civil rights and the voting rights movement that the Library of Congress hosts.
For a number of years, the Library of Congress, starting with, for instance, women's suffrage.
Yes.
One of my predecessors knew Susan B. Anthony and said, we'd like your papers. So the library has been at the forefront of really looking at what are some of the historic events, movements, personages in history that need to be remembered and provide firsthand resources. You know, the letters of Frederick Douglass or the letters of 23 presidents and Supreme Court justices, as well as everyday people and groups like veterans, our Veterans History Program, where we have oral histories of over 100,000 individuals. So the Library of Congress's mission in providing a resource for Congress to be able to do the research it needs and to be able to have that historic
I'd like to say, and I know my time is up, but I want to just commend the Library of Congress for its book supplies that you give us an opportunity
books.
to the surplus books to go to our local libraries and local classrooms, and it's an amazing program that benefits all of us. So thank you very much.
The gentlewoman yields back. Mr. Griffith is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So we had Ms. Perlmutter in here a couple weeks ago talking about some new proposed rulemaking. And based on your opening statement, you're at least vaguely familiar with that. And they've got an office of proposed, a notice, the Copyright Office has a notice of proposed rulemaking out there. And it strongly encourages folks to submit digitized copies of their works to the Copyright Office. Some would even argue that it essentially requires that you digitize your work to send it in, at least to get it in a timely manner processed for copyright. And here's the dilemma that, and I wasn't very articulate that time, and I may not be this time, but here's the concern that's been raised. If you require that it be digitized to file with the Copyright Office, and then the Copyright Office immediately sends that to the Library of Congress without a licensing agreement, aren't you kind of putting yourself in the position of Napster, where now you all have it, that's available to the public in essence, and yet there's no licensing agreement? That's the concern, is that they're being required, or at least strongly encouraged, to submit a digitized copy to copyright, and then they're actually bypassing the copyright because they send it to y'all in that digitized form without a licensing agreement.
The Library of Congress uses digitized content in a very responsible manner and fair use. And so it would not make available.
Not accusing. What I'm saying is that I think that there's a glitch in the process that may be setting up a system where it may accidentally get abused. That's the concern that I've heard. And I raised that to your attention. I'm not sure that Ms. Perlmutter was fully understanding it. Ms. Bice and I both had questions on it. I just asked you to go back and take a look at it, because that's what Library of Congress has always been great on that. Not fussing about it, just worried that we might be creating a system where we accidentally bypass the copyright by forcing the digitization, which is then immediately sent to the Library of Congress.
Thank you for bringing that up at this point, because as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we are working very diligently with the Copyright Office on their continuous development of their registration system. That's the hardest part of what they've been doing in terms of modernizing. And so to bring up different issues and concerns at this point is very timely. We have a public stakeholder group. They've been bringing up a lot of things too, so thank you for this.
Well, take a look at it. I appreciate that. Now I'm going to switch over to another. I love real books. There's nothing better than sitting in a chair, particularly if you can get a fire going, and reading a real book. But what I find in my job, and there are lots of other people in similar types of jobs, is that I very rarely get that chance. And so what I do is I'm often doing audiobooks. And through Libby, I'm able to get a lot of books. What I have found, though, is that my Roanoke Valley Library's Libby has more offerings, at least that I'm looking for, than the Library of Congress. It looks like you want to address that, and I want you to address that.
Your public library probably
Yep.
has more of the current fiction or mysteries and things like that.
Well, I find
for
it to be
circulation.
true. I find it to be true also with older books. So I thought it was interesting because we were sitting here having this chat. So I quickly looked up Frederick Douglass, and there's a couple of ebooks that I found on Libby, but no audiobooks. Although there was one that said you have this process, for those who don't know it, you can tag it, and I want to compliment the Library of Congress on that in just a second. But so I tagged the Frederick Douglass narratives of the life of Frederick Douglass by Frederick Douglass, because I'd love to listen to that. And it's a fairly short listen, 4 hours. That's
It's
halfway across my district. I'll be done before I can get to the other side. But it's things like The Last Line, Manchester's book on Winston Churchill, is not available either place. So it's not just I get it. When I'm looking for some fluff, I expect my local library to have it. But when I'm looking for deeper things, I might want to see some more from the Library of Congress. Just wondering what y'all's plans are on that. I know it's new and I know it's a small market, but what are y'all's plans on that, on
Well,
increasing your audiobooks?
This is also timely as well, because as you know, and people have even asked, if I'm listening to a book, am I reading? Yes, you are, okay? And so as we expand and provide that service as well, beyond basic research and history and things for members of Congress, we'll be cognizant of looking at what the requests are.
And
what
I was going to
aren't filled.
compliment you, and I want to, if I can take just another couple seconds. I tagged a James L. Nelson book earlier this year, and about 6 weeks later, it popped up, and I was able to listen to it from the Library of Congress, which is a swashbuckler. He writes naval stories. Anyway, I yield back.
It's good to hear, and in fact, and I know that some of my colleagues are with me today, we're taking note of that's a good opportunity to do a survey and ask what types of things people would be interested in.
Gentleman yields back. Always happy to have a conversation on Libby. I think a lot of us do a lot of driving. I actually use a lot of the audiobooks on Libby from the Library of Congress as well. Now recognize Dr. Murphy for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming for the committee. I had one quick question. How many books are overdue? And
Members of
specifically, how many?
Congress are the only people
What's
who
that?
can, members of Congress are the only patrons that we have
Okay.
circulate materials to. And we keep records
Would you
of
commit
how
to making
long.
that a public record of who owes money to the Library of Congress? And,
You
I
don't
think-
owe money.
I don't.
We have appropriations, though.
I just think it would be a good revenue thing, so, but
Well-
anyway, in all seriousness, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the Veterans History Project.
Oh, yes.
It's, I'm blessed to have almost 1 out of 10 of my constituents as a veteran, and we've been very active in seeking out stories with so much of our military community, Camp Lejeune and New River Air Station, Cherry Point. We've had 3 very successful events, collected over 30 oral histories, 900 minutes of stories. And I just wanted to know, can you give an update or a progress report about, we have so much, I think we're just touching the surface on this. We have so much more work to do.
We have approximately 117,000 collections, and we've migrated the legacy database to a more modern form, and we are really looking at having a more robust website and making it easier for veterans and their families to record and submit their oral histories. And so that's a major initiative that we are working on. So we want to do more with members of Congress in terms of the workshops. We have staff that will come into districts and do that.
So we have, so our district has a quarter of them, essentially. That's of the
Right.
ones that have been collected.
And we
so-
definitely, and there's certain engagements that we are very interested in, more recent engagements, veterans, and of course, the Vietnam era is one that's a
If I
little
may
difficult.
make one suggestion, I do think we need to decrease the bureaucracy of it a little bit. It's a little bit onerous. I actually tried to do it for my own family, and it made it much too hard. So I do think we need to cut that probably in half. We need more stories. We don't necessarily need
Yes.
100% of the details. But anyway, but thank you for doing that. We should have, 5,000 at this
We
point.
should.
So want to switch things over a little bit to funding for the Library of Congress. And it's my understanding we've gotten donations anywhere between 15 and 25 million over the last couple of years. So I want to dive into a little bit on how the trust fund board works. How do they solicit funds? What type of investors, rather, do we get to invest in a private manner for the Library of Congress?
The trust fund board, as you might be aware, is appointed, and the library is not involved in terms of saying who should be on it. And so they manage the library's funds. The funds that are raised are mission-specific, and they are supplemental to our basic operations. The funds provide opportunities for things that we wouldn't be able to do. And so that's really what the trust fund board
How do you
manages.
interact with them?
We give reports. They work with the trust fund manager, a management company that the board vets and hires to manage the funds, and they work with our Office of
Do you
Financial
submit
Services.
a wish list to them to say, hey, we'd like these things, and then it's their job to try to help fund them?
No, they do not try to help, they do not solicit funds. The library has a development office that submits proposals and things like that. They basically manage the funds of the library. They are not propelling and saying, this is what you should raise funds for.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Kerry is recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to thank the chairman. I also would like to thank the ranking member for having this hearing. The chairman made a statement early on about the national treasures that obviously at the Library of Congress. I would argue that the Library of Congress is a national treasure, and so I appreciate you being here today. I have a very short time, obviously about 5 minutes, but I do want to touch on a couple of issues prior to your arrival. The IT challenges were a serious issue for the Library of Congress. The OIG and the GAO identified the deficiencies in IT management in numerous reports. During your tenure, and you've done a great job of this, addressing those deficiencies has been a major priority for the library. This coincides with an ongoing trend to centralize all of the library's technology needs under the control of the OCIO. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, and it was part of the GAO report and recommendation that the information technology operations in the Library of Congress be centralized.
So can you explain how the initiative has benefited the library in general?
Off the bat, there were economies in terms of purchasing equipment, standardization of equipment, and being able to work on projects that would integrate the information technology systems, many of which were over 20 or 30 years old, and to have a dedicated group that was looking at the library as a whole. So you have economies of purchasing, skill, and then accessibility and coordination between units.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I want to thank you for your comments. And with the short amount of time that I have left, I want to quickly shift the conversation to the Library of Congress's field offices.
Yes.
So the Library of Congress has a handful of these field offices in other countries around the world, and these field offices are located within the U.S. embassies. Am I correct with that?
Yes. Six
Six of them?
offices.
So can you kind of speak of the necessity of these field offices to carry out the Library of Congress's mission?
And the term office really captures what these operations are. They are offices that are led by a Library of Congress head person, and also nationals from the area who are responsible for acquiring materials from different parts of the world. The Library of Congress collects in 470 languages. And so the people in the field office acquire materials in different languages, and the Library of Congress also is the coordinator and administrator for over 120 other educational institutions in the United States who pay for that service. So we're collecting not only for the Library of Congress, but for other colleges and universities and research centers in the United States.
So so when you said there's six, I mean,
Yes.
and not to put you on the spot, but what countries are they in?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because the first one is in Cairo, Islamabad, Jakarta, Nairobi, New Delhi, and Rio de Janeiro.
Okay, well, she gets 100%. Mr. Chairman, with that, again, I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate you being here, Doctor.
Thank you.
And talking to all of us. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. De-Esposito may or may not be able to join us here, but I'm just going to ask one more question in the event that he comes back. Otherwise, we'll wrap the hearing at that point. I just want to touch base on the Library of Congress's Office of Inspector General report that found the Library of Congress had not sufficiently tracked or managed the agency's strategic directional plans. Have you made progress in implementing the recommendations of the OIG report, or could you just give us an update on that status?
The library's made great progress, and we've worked very closely with the IG's office and their assessment of that. And so we launched a new strategic plan, but we've also been able to put in a lot of the initiatives for managing risk, for performance measurements, and we hope that in the next year, we would be able to satisfy the Inspector General's requirements to take strategic planning off of the library's top management.
And you think you'll be in that position next fiscal year?
We're very hopeful. We're hopeful. We had hoped for this year, but there were still things we needed to do.
Understood. We look forward to you continuing updates for us on that. I'll now recognize Mr. De Esposito for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Doctor. In January of this year, the Library of Congress restricted the use of generative AI tools to use only within authorized pilot programs. As of today, how many pilots have been authorized at the Library of Congress that incorporate the use of AI tools?
And I'm very pleased that you noted that we are assessing and making sure that we are not on the cutting edge of AI, and we have a number of use cases. So in each of the service units, there are experiments and pilots that we're looking at. For instance, CRS is looking at how AI could be used. So I would say, and I'd have to get back to you on the exact number of the use cases, but they are limited, they are controlled, and we are very concerned that there is governance of anything that happens with AI so we can maintain the quality of service and that we provide currently.
Okay, thank you. On Long Island, where I represent, there's over 100,000 veterans. Almost half of them live in Nassau County, which is part of my district. And I appreciate the Library of Congress's efforts with their Veterans Historic Project. Could you explain to me and us how the Library of Congress works with local communities for those who volunteer in this project, such as veterans and Gold Star families?
And the Gold Star Family project, and when we were able to expand to Gold Star families, that really helped in terms of getting more people to participate in the program. And so we have staff members that will actually visit communities. I've been part of that out in Wyoming, where we give workshops and work with local communities to train volunteers, and we have been working very hard to make sure that our digital efforts make it easier for people to participate. And so there's quite a bit of outreach going on, and we want to expand that.
And how do you go about deciding where your outreach is?
We
You mentioned Wyoming, so for example, how does Wyoming become a place where?
Senator Enzi.
Okay.
And particular members come to us. Some are very active, and so our Congressional Relations Office has been really trying to make an effort to go to each office and say, we can make it easier and all of this. So we would love to have more participation, because that's the straight, really way to get to communities, because members know the groups.
Okay. Yeah, so I think what would be beneficial is for us to make sure that our colleagues know that.
Yes.
That, opportunities like this are available. I think that's probably part of the, that will help us get these programs into communities throughout the country, because I think the work that's being done is important. But obviously, if the information isn't delivered to every corner, we have to do better.
It was interesting that during the pandemic, when we participated in a lot of town halls, virtual town halls, we were able to really get the word out that way too. We actually gave presentations with members and things like that, and putting and connecting veterans history to member websites is also a way.
Okay. Okay. Well, I look forward to working with your office and trying to help make sure we can let our colleagues know about those resources. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Dr. Hayden, we appreciate you being here with us today. We appreciate all the work you do. We know in any organization, it's not just one person. There's a handful of people that work at the Library of Congress that are sitting behind you. I know there's many others who may be watching online or who work day in and day out. We appreciate all the work you do, but we also appreciate all the work so many do at the Library of Congress to share not only the national treasures, but to be a resource in research or as well maybe just to simply listen to a Libby book online, as Dr. Griffith spoke about. So we appreciate you being here and the work you do. Without objection, each member will have 5 legislative days to assert additional materials into the record or to revise and extend their remarks. If there's no further business, I thank the members for their participation. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.